Hello, good afternoon. Dennis Hubbard, gardening tips number 37. Perhaps this gardening tips will be a little different from the others because it's so very cold outside and we're going to spend quite a little time in the greenhouse. The frost has been so bad, it's killed an awful lot of shrubs and plants that would have otherwise survived. And you take the crocuses. The bulbs have got really frosted, and the consequence is a lot of them will not flower. But anyway, that's by the way. The main thing about all this is small greenhouse, plenty of activity. You don't have to have a huge big greenhouse for activity. It's not heated, which is a bit awkward when you're trying to grow things, but on the other hand it's very expensive, and if we can produce the stuff without heat, then it saves money. But when we're talking about growing things, we need two things. We need sunshine and we need water. A third of the world's area, I think it's a third, is covered in water. A quarter of the world is covered in desert with no water. Consequently, we get the droughts and floods. And that parsnips there, which balance of what we grew last year, would feed a child for a fortnight in places like Africa and India and places like that. If there are any boffins watching this program, could they tell me how much water would have to be dispersed worldwide to lower the sea levels? Because that's another problem. The oceans and seas are rising, causing problems all around the world. How much water would be needed to offset that water by irrigation? Irrigation in Africa, irrigation in India and other parts of the world. People are starving. You may come up with the answer for the cost to irrigate Africa. I mean, what was the cost of going to the moon? What is the cost of trying to get to Mars and beyond, where it's hundreds of years of light years away? What a complete waste of money. In the early 1900s, in the early 20th century, there was a film called Out of Africa, and the opening lines were from the person from Holland who decided to make this farm in Africa. She said, "I had a farm in Africa," and she produced a coffee plantation out of nothing. Obviously she got some money backing behind her, but nevertheless she got a coffee plantation working very well. The African natives, they worked on the plantation, they worked in the processing department, they even set up a school. That was in the early 20th century, where the Africans were virtually starving. They'd never seen an aeroplane, never seen a motor car. They were really behind the times. That was the earlier 20th century. In the middle of the 20th century, oh by the way, the coffee was all ground, it was all ready for transportation, and it burnt down. The whole lot was burnt down, accidentally possibly, and that was the end of that little venture there. But it did prove in the early 20th century how bad the Africans were. In the middle of the 20th century, I had a garden in Africa. The two people who were in Out of Africa were Meryl Streep and Robert Redford. And there are coincidences with their business in Africa and mine. Coincidences. Robert Redford had the same Christian name as me. His name was taken up, Dennis I forget the second name. There were coincidences, but when I went and I had this little garden, I was in the Tropic of Cancer, near the equator, which was in the old days called the South Equator. The out of Africa people were in the north of equator, in the Tropic of Cancer, which used to be the North Tropic. Now I had a little garden, very small, but it encouraged the local Africans to get involved. Now the electricity supply where I was formed by the colonials, or the British government, damming a river and creating a hydroelectric. Now the Africans were very keen to get involved in making their own little gardens. At the end of the 20th century, they haven't moved on one iota. They're still starving. There's 2 million children under 5 die before they're 5-year-old in the world. This is due to the lack of obviously of food. But if you had the irrigation, you can turn a desert into a garden. There are oases in deserts, which proves the point. The thing is, does water ever disappear? Does it ever disperse into nothing? If you irrigated the whole of Africa and other parts of India and other parts of the world, would that water eventually get back to the sea, or would we be able to have a lower sea level throughout the world? And if there are any boffins about who can answer that question, it would be very interesting, because if you poured water into a desert, how long would it be before it reached a saturation point? And by doing this, you would reduce, as I say, reduce the sea levels all over the world. But the question is, how much would you need to irrigate to do this? Now, if anybody watching this has got any ideas on how that could be done, and agree with me that to spend more money on the outer space to get to somewhere where you're never ever going to get there, get this planet sorted out before we spend all that amount of dollars, pounds, marks, whatever it is, euros as well. Unless we do alter that, we're going to have 2 million children dying under 5 in this mid-century and the end of the century, and that just is not fair. Anyway, that's my little my little grievance for today. It must be the cold weather that's making me say this, but I'm very, very keen that something should be done. Building dams to avoid these floods. It costs money. The Boulder Dam or the Hoover Dam in America, if it weren't for that, there'd be complete floods. Here in Lincolnshire, we have all these barriers to prevent flooding. It can be done in other countries to stop these floods. Anyway, that's me finished for that. The next gardening will be about gardening. Sorry for that, but I've got it off my chest now, and I hope some of it sinks in. Thank you very much. Bye.